talk to us, I think, about the Great Fire. You all see that sign out there, the historical marker that says in 1928 the sanctuary was destroyed in a fire. Well, Raymond's going to talk to us about that. But Raymond, before you do that, why don't you tell them how you started coming to church here? I didn't hear this story till tonight, and I bet you nobody but Mary, besides Raymond, knows about this. Come on, Raymond.
I'm not a good speaker, so it'll take long. I started coming here up to I was 7 years old and didn't go anywhere. And when I was 7, a girl in the neighborhood got to bring me to Sunday school in 1921, same year that Dr. Jerry Moore came here. And same year my parents started coming. And from then on, every time the door was open, they were here.
Even when it snowed.
I've sat in the sanctuary many times with the overcoat and overshoes on because didn't have much heat. At that time, the back wall of the kitchen was the end of the church. Fellowship of the education building wasn't built in 27. Children's classes all met in this room in circles, and the men's Bible class met in the sanctuary, and the women met back where the office is. At that time, January 28th, the time of the fire, I wasn't but 13 years old. And there was a group of men, just volunteers, carrying stuff out of the church up to get to. They wouldn't let me help, so I stood across the street and watched them. The fire department at that time had one truck, and the men, firemen, were all volunteers. And it's below freezing, water froze fast and hit the ground. And, one of our members, Charlie Cochran, was the fire chief, and he fell on the ice and broke his arm. And another member, Henry Snap, who was also a fireman, tried to save the pulpit valve, but couldn't get to it, and it burned. I stood over there and saw the steeple fall, and the bell fell and buried in the porch, cracked. And they later set it back up east somewhere and had it recast from the same metal. And the sanctuary roof burned off, along with the pews and the organ. The education building roof from the top floor burned off. And the other floors had water damage. And with the equipment they had, and the weather the way it was, I don't see how they ever put any of it out. They did. The fire was on Saturday night. We had services Sunday morning in the Capitol Theater. And on Monday morning, they started to rebuild. I suppose they formed the building committee as W.C. Waddell, her father was chairman of it, and R.C. Bird Sr., W.R. Lowry, and my father, Grover Bird, and lots of others put in untold hours rebuilding. They actually neglected their own business to get the church rebuilt. And the fire was in January. We were back in the church in September, even with the new organ. Well, I got ahead of myself a little. These businessmen wrote their suppliers, asked for donations of material and money, and the reply was tremendous. When they finished, they owed $30,000, which is a lot of money in those days. It took nearly 20 years to pay it off. Dr. Moore was still pastor, and he wanted paid before he died. So he got out, called on the congregation members, told them he wanted cash, not a pledge. Not enough to pay it off. I guess that's about it.
When did they burn the note? It was sometime before.
After all, that's 72 years.
How long have you been the treasurer? Long time. What's the treasurer?
Treasurer, 21 years.
21 years. That's wonderful.
If anybody has a question, I might answer. They think it started back in this corner where the organ motor is, floor. They think it started from that floor. And then it got up into the sanctuary.
Did we have insurance, Raymond?
I suppose they had some.
We had some that didn't cover.
Probably one here and
Mm-hmm.
They got lots of donations of material, and cash, and still, I don't know how much they had.
Mary Moore,
Raymond, is the present sanctuary the same way it looked back then?
Virtually, I think the pews in the old sanctuary were curved. I think that's about the only difference.
Answer to Alan's question, back on the bulletin board in one of the pictures, you can see before the fire they are bowed, and in the others they're straight. There's pictures back there.
And the urban plates were showing in the front.
Yes. Louise?
Mary Moore said she was Dr. Moore's daughter, and they had a little brother, Paul. And they came down with their father watching the church burn, or seeing it burn. And she said that her little brother looked up at their daddy, the minister, and said, "Daddy, are you going to have a job now?" Dr. Moore answered, "Yes, a much larger." I think it's a wonderful story.
Libby, I think it was 1944 when they burned it up. 44.
And I'm sure they did it very carefully. Dan?
One of the pictures here, it looks as though the front porch is much higher than it was in the old picture.
Same height. There's an old picture over yonder that shows it before they had a railing and banisters on the porch. That's before my time.
Well, all three of these folks will be available for some more questions after we're through here this evening. And our next speaker, who's going to talk about the Presbyterian women, and she tells me some other things, is Elizabeth Talent.
You know, he asked me to do this. I got interested in it, and I found so much that I could just have talked all night long on it. More interesting things happen. And really, the person that should talk about the women is Louise, because she's writing a history of the church, and she knows so much more about it than I do.
She's not old enough.
That's right. Getting there. But I think an interesting thing that she told me that I want to pass on to you all. They were reading the minutes of the earliest Women's Association of Presbyterian Church, Ms. W.A. Susan was the secretary, and she had written in her minutes that some of the ladies of the church, now this is in the early days, very early days, had petitioned the session to have a prayer group for the church to further have prayer and Bible study. So they called a meeting. Of course, you know Presbyterians, they always call a meeting. They called a session together, and they gave it much thought. And after they had talked about it and all, they decided that it would be all right for the ladies to meet. But the stipulation was they could only meet when there was in their presence of a minister. And when you comment with me, you'll never know what those women might pray for. I think that's an introduction to the women's movement. Then I heard another tale that is amazing, and you aren't going to believe this except 3 or 4 of you because you know them. But if you knew Bessie Whalen and D.J. Smith, Dorothy Jean, and Vivian Susong, you would certainly believe this tale. We've always been hard up, you know. I can't remember, and I know about this because my father was the treasurer for 25 years, right? We've got a few years to go. And I would hear Daddy talk about, well, we just don't have any money. I've just got to get out and talk to the man. We just don't have any money. I don't know whether I'm going to be able to pay Dr. Moore or not. And so this went on all the time. But anyway, they were talking about the front of the church and said it was very, very soiled, dirty, and it needed paint. And there wasn't any money. So they said, well, what in the world will we do? Well, just leave it to the women, the First Presbyterian women. DJ and Vivian went down to the fire hall, and they got the fire truck, but they tossed the man into it. They came up here with ladders, and those 3 women got out the front, and they washed the front of the church. I never estimate, this is the truth, never underestimate the Presbyterian women. We have always been able to come forward with something. But we have our serious side, too. Now, Louisa Moore was one of the early women in our church, and she was very interested in the education and in the training of our young people. And so she organized different groups, and she and her sister, Mrs. Brown, they were the daughters of Louisa Moore, who was the organizer of the first Louisa Moore Missionary Society, right, Louise? And so these 2 ladies took care of the youth of the church. And I can remember so well when I was a little girl, after school was over, we would go up Brown's Hill to Miss A.L. Brown's house, and she'd have cookies and something for us to drink, and then we'd get busy on crafts and Bible study and all the things that the children do now. And we went through the Lily Lovett Circle, and then we went through all the different ages, and we were really very well taken care of. And then the young people met on Sunday night, and it was called the Christian Endeavor. You remember that, don't you, Libby? And we met and had a Bible study, and we also had fun. So you see, the ladies have always carried their part of the church. And at the same time, watch my time. We had 3 choirs, 3 wonderful choirs in this church. Miss Bessie Milligan, who is Mr. Wiley Milligan's mother, had a choir during my time. And she was highly trained, and we had so much fun. And then later came Mary Moore Hudson, who was the daughter of Dr. Jerry Moore, and it was a good choir. And then later Mary Ellen. So you know, all through the years, and the First Presbyterian Church, you may not know this, but we've always been noted for our music in this church because we demand it, just like we demand. Do you realize that our ministers are all doctors of divinity? Have you thought about that? That this is a requirement of the Presbyterian Church. Our ministers are first in Greek and Latin, and they're educated men, and we've always felt that this was important so that we would have an educated congregation. So, right. So the same thing happened in the music department. Miss Mamie Bittner and Miss Margaret Temple went off to music school and majored in church music. And all through the years, we've had outstanding musicians, and we still have today. We've had 3 male musicians. We had Dr. Charles Oliver Gray, who was head of the department out of Tuscaloosa was our choir director and organist for many years. In fact, he died in the pulpit of our church. He was stricken and died on the organ bench. And then after that, we had Celestine Rosenblatt, and we had, of course, our own lovely Dr. Crew. So we've always had just wonderful musicians in our church. Our first musician was Swanee Robinson, who was Louise's aunt, and she was, Louise Bird Robinson gave us the first organ that we had, and when it burned, he gave us the next one. I would be remiss, I'm going to stop, but there's two people that I've just got to talk about, and that's Muncie Bird and Louise Roberts. Nobody can underestimate what Louise Roberts and Muncie Bird meant to the youth of our church. They were just a guiding light to all of us. So we've had wonderful teachers in the Sunday school, Raymond's mother, and so many people that gave up their time and effort. We've always had good teachers. One thing I want to comment on that Raymond didn't tell, is that I remember so well. After the fire, we've never seen people work like the First Presbyterian women did. And we raised hundreds and hundreds of dollars by the sweat of our brow. And I really mean that. The women had supper after supper, lunch after lunch. We fed everybody in Greenville that would come that was paid to eat. And the ladies washed the dishes and cooked the meals. I remember because my mother was one of the ones who dropped the bird. And Miss Ella Robinson, I can see them in the kitchen now with their sleeves rolled up, making those hot rolls. And we did that because that's the reason I had forgotten when we burned the note, because it seemed like to me that all we did was get money to pay off the debt of the church. And so we're a working church. We always have been. We're a praying church, and we're proud of our church. We're proud of our heritage. And thank you for your time.
And I'm really glad that we can entrust them to pray on their own now, myself. Can you believe?
Are you sure?
No, I trust you. And now, if you want to hear what people did to have a good time and how different it was from today, today we've got the internet and we've got television, and there are very few of us that can remember not having television. Now, I can remember that. I can remember not even having a telephone. Well, like I said, it's rural Scott County. But Libby Seville is going to tell us a little bit about how people had fun in the earlier years of the 20th century.
First, I want to tell you that I never wanted to be the president of the Women's Association. That is the secret that I tried to keep hidden. But the other secret is that I always wanted to be a past president.
So does Leanne.
I had 105 minutes of stories about the church, and a lot of them I shouldn't tell, period. But I'm not going to do any of that. I had to rewrite my speech after I heard that I was to have 5 minutes instead of 105. So one little story I want to tell about the Women's Association. It's my favorite, and don't look at Betsy or Zach or Bess, because they've already heard all of these stories so many times that they won't look interested. But anyway, I was in the kitchen at one time that a lot of people will never forget. And the kitchen is really just not my best place to be. As Betsy always said, I was better out in the living room. But the woman that I had finally talked into being the chairman of the kitchen committee,
she had moved here from another town, and she had had this job in another town, but that was before she got herself a new husband and moved to Greenville. And so she was just really in a hurry. She never had time to do that job. And so since I had gotten her to be, because I was on the nominating committee, I'd gotten her to take the job, I felt responsible, and so I kept trying to fill in for her or to get somebody else to fill in. And so this is the only reason that I happened to be in the kitchen this particular time. But we had one of those old majestic ranges, an old-fashioned cook stove that would take either wood or coal and warmed up the whole kitchen. And so one day I was in there with them. It was night, rather. It was the congregational dinner. And we had 6 great big casseroles of potatoes, either potatoes or a macaroni. And the one in the back, I was rearranging them to put another one in, and I turned over one in the back corner of this great big stove. And so I wish that Dell Haynes could have been here tonight, but all of you know her. And she just wouldn't ever have associated her with the kitchen, period, because she was, in her young days, she was one of the most glamorous women and very stylish and very good looking. And she said, "Libby, out of my way." And she did little arms just like that. And boy, I moved out of her way, and she started rearranging those casseroles. And she had that one out of there in no time flat without turning another one over, so that there wouldn't be that odor of something burning in the oven on all 6 of the casseroles. And so that is the reason I had to call today. I couldn't think of the name of our majestic range. But then I want to tell you one thing that has nothing to do with church, but on Saturday they did demand that I take a bath when I was a little girl. And so Saturday afternoon came and the house was cold, although they had put a furnace in the house because I was going to be born. And but it was not sufficient for the job, so they put a great big wash tub in our kitchen and bathed me in there so I would smell good on Sunday morning, because although it was too cold for me to take a bath, we were going to church the next morning. We never missed. And so that was majestic, but Betsy has called around to her sisters and found out that Home Comfort was the name of another one if you had one of those in your grandmother's house. But the majestic was the one that we sold at the hardware, so naturally that was what we had. I just got to tell about one little story about Betsy's husband. She doesn't like to be connected with me tonight, I'm sure. But anyway, her husband was my brother's. And he was 7 years old when his mother got pregnant. And so she had him pray on his knees, as she did me too, every single night. And he had to pray every single night for a black-headed, brown-eyed little sister with curly hair. And so after he got me and he had to push the carriage, he says, "I good and well know I'll never pray for any more sisters." You know, they let me go last. I have 2 or 3 people in the audience that are supposed to hold their hand up when it's long enough. And I'll add Beth and Zachary to that list if they could do that.
Well, tell them about taking the train to Knoxville.
Well, now, I thought you were going to tell about the train to Knoxville, and so I hadn't counted that in my 5 minutes. What I do want to tell you was that this was our prayer meeting room right here, always, and we never missed, no matter what the weather was. My daddy carried me to Roby School even, and so he certainly wouldn't have minded carrying me to church. But anyway, in the summertime, it would be so hot in here that we would meet out on the front lawn. Can you imagine us wanting to know, for anybody, any other church people to know how many people we had present for prayer meeting? But anyway, we would go out there and have prayer meeting, and that was one of the most wonderful memories of just sitting out there in the cool air, you know, and having prayer meeting out there instead of being in a building. And of course, after Bob Johnson came, we stopped having prayer meeting and we started having study groups. I think all the people who could pray out loud in front of a crowd had died off. Listen, I want to tell one on Raymond's uncle. Raymond's uncle, of course, was my daddy's brother-in-law by marriage. And so we were all connected. But anyway, we were not blood kin, but I felt like we were. And his mother was one of my Sunday school teachers, and the most wonderful one. And my Aunt Laura was one of my Sunday school teachers. And Barney Bell Barkley was one of my Sunday school teachers. And this is her daughter over here, right there. And we're so glad to have her back. We don't know what to do. But one night, my Uncle Bob was not a prayer. I don't know whether your daddy was or not to get up and pray, but we had these prayers, Mr. Freer and Mr. Williams, you know. And so one night I was sitting next to my Uncle Bob Bird, and so Jerry Moore called on, he must have been mad at Uncle Bob about something, and he called on him to pray, and I could see Uncle Bob's finger right now. He just pointed his finger right there and just did like that and just touched Mr. Freer, and Mr. Freer just started right off. One thing I wanted to try very hard to remember was that I never remember not wanting to come to this church, not for any meeting. I mean, I wanted to come. I always anticipated it, and I can't think of anything that I didn't like about it. And the incidences that I thought were funny, embarrassing, exciting, you members would not be impressed by anything because everything is so big now, and the affairs that happened once a year back then in the 20s and the 30s, the 40s, and the 50s, they happen once a week now in this church. But I mean, there used to be these special times, you know, when you got to go to the church and eat, and we had a wonderful meal, and it was just wonderful. And now every occasion is bigger and better than the last one and happens more often. And you people are so accustomed to looking at either Jim Carrey, if you're very, very current, or Jay Leno or Letterman, and hearing their jokes, and so nothing would be very funny to our children, and the ones that I can think of that might be funny are too naughty to tell. Time, you can go home, Ben. Okay, let's see. But that doesn't count the minutes I get to tell about the trip to nonsense. Yeah. But anyway, this is about lunch on the lawn, dinner on the lawn out at Tusculum College. We did this one time during the whole summer, you know. And oh my goodness, that was, look forward to that. They had banana cream pie. And all the ladies from all of our churches in the parish came in and brought the very best thing that they were able to cook. And the whole thing was so wonderful. And the memory that I have is that all of you, I'm sure, know where McCormick Hall is, the one right at the end of the long walk in the front. And these tables worked like these tables right here, and they had those tables put up, and they went all the way down past the library to where the big science hall is now. Of course, it wasn't there when I was a child. And everybody from all of these different places, they had their table. And I mean, everything was fixed on it, you know, just for a whole bunch of people. And we could eat all we wanted to, and we talked about it until the next year. It was a great, big, wonderful affair. And of course, they had this fried chicken and the slices of country ham and the potato salad and the slaw and the baked beans and the the salad, and the banana cream pie, and the apple cherry pie, and the chocolate, and the lemon, and every kind of cake that you could imagine, and watermelon. Watermelon, can you imagine? Now, I've already told about that. Oh, isn't that fortunate? Now, I'm going to tell one naughty little story, Beth, so you and Zachary put your fingers in your ears. I have a story to tell. Oh, Lord, the boss is coming. I have a story to tell about Ruth. In the Bible, I know that all of you are familiar with Ruth and Boaz and Obed, or Obed, whichever it was, and that Obed was the father of Jesse, and Jesse was the father of David. And now one of my favorite little girlfriends, her name was Ruth. And so this is my Ruth story. And I had another friend that was Louise Orr's first cousin, Barbara Willis Alexander, and she was not naughty like I was, but she was mischievous, and she could think of more stuff. And so our main thing was to get Ruth to go to church with us and put her in the middle, and then try to get her tickled enough to have an accident. No, I've got to tell about the train trip. I thought that Raymond was going to tell that, so this is really on his... We went to Knoxville to Chilhowie Park on the train. And the train was even fun for us back then. You know, none of us were really used to it. And not many of you are used to it now. But three little boys, and I'm sure Raymond was one of them, Raymond and Paul Moore and Herrick Brown came, and Bobby Bird, I'm sure. And they came running up to Dr. Moore, and he was seated near me. And they said, "Oh, Dr. Moore, we're going 60 miles an hour." And Dr. Moore says, "Well, I'll certainly take care of that." And he closed up his coat, and boy, he started going back down, right down to tell that motorboat to make that thing down. And of course, then we were so sorry that our friends, the boys, had to go and tell everything. Now wait a minute, just about the fire. Okay, is that the night of the fire, my mother and I stayed on the upstairs porch of our house, and it was over where Rutherford and Moss is now, and we could see everything and hear everything, and we knew that things were terrible. And my daddy had a habit that when he went to bed at night, he put his pants out in his chair that he had a leather rocker in his room, and stretched out just so that he could just move them just a little bit and get right straight into those pants and be gone in no time to town. If anybody had any trouble, well, then he was ready to go, and he had his pistol to shoot it off in case he saw a fire. Because back in those days, you shot a pistol 3 times, and then if help didn't come, then you waited a while, and then you shot it 3 more times. And everybody was allowed to have their own pistol back then. And so that night, we watched everything, but that was just the worst night that we'd ever had. And let's see now, do I have anything funny I could end off with? Oh yeah, I want to tell you one more thing. You've never heard this one. You've never heard this one. Oh, this is one of those embarrassing moments when there was retribution at the end, I believe is the right word.
This is biblical.
But anyway, we one of our groups, like the Pioneer Club or something like that, we were going to Davis Springs it was about a mile out in the country where the Kingsleys live, Libby Talon and you will remember the Kingsley family. And we were going on a picnic, and my mother was one of these nervous women, and and all of a sudden somebody says, "Oh, there's your daddy." And my daddy was 6'1", and he had these longest legs. And I just could see him running now, and taking these great big runs to catch up with us. And my mother had set a thermos because I was not to drink the water in the spring. And so I made it until 3 o'clock that afternoon and used the thermos, and went ahead and and then they all talked all day long about how good the water was, and particularly to me. And my thermos did get a fly, and so that was my excuse. Well, when I got home, my mother said, Elizabeth, did you drink the water? And I said, well, not till 3 o'clock. And so, for that, I did not get to go to see the first Jackie Coogan movie that had ever been in Greenville, and I had to, oh, that's another story. Oh, gosh, I've got to tell you another story. Louise hadn't put her hand up yet.
Well, you're funny.
I've just got 2 observations to make after listening to these stories. First of all, it's the debt of gratitude that we owe to the people of that generation that we're so blessed to have with us, to share these stories with us. We wouldn't be here today, and we wouldn't be what we are today without them. And secondly, what kind of stories in 2050, when they have a blast from the past, are they going to be saying about this church then? Let's just hope that they're as happy memories as these fine people have. Thank you so much for sharing these memories with us. And thank you very much for coming. And if y'all want to come up and talk to our friends anymore, come right ahead. Wait. Yes.
Oh, we got the winner.
All the contest winners.